Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the first build video of the Huracan. Now obviously if you're a regular viewer of the channel, it may sound more echoey and obviously this is a different background. We are not in the new shop, we are in a temporary shop because we just moved into our new house. If you are interested in watching my other channel, which talks about all the other stuff going on in our life, link down below. But stay tuned and we will get into the build of this amazing Huracan aircraft. Alright guys, well we're in the temporary shop and making do of the space that we have. On the other side of you guys right now, we have all of our house stuff stacked up. It's pretty crazy, but I managed to construct a nice little temporary shop here in our new gymnasium. So there's a shot of all of our stuff, but here's my temporary shop. So it actually worked out pretty good. We've got a decent amount of space, almost as much space here as we do in our previous shop, which is good. So house is still under construction. That's why we're in this, this temporary shop. All right, so speaking of shops, we're gonna get this out of the way at the beginning of this video so then we can move on to the build. In the last A10 video, or one of the previous videos, I asked you guys, and the reason I asked you guys this is because there's tons of people that came forward and say, hey, I want to help you build your new shop. So financially, I'd like to give you some money to help you build your new shop. So I stewed on it for a long time and asked you guys if it's something you're interested in. So I went ahead and started all the different channels to raise funds to build the new shop. So if you guys are not interested in helping at all, totally fine, but many of you reached out and said we'd love to help out with the new shop. So I've got some cool ideas on how to recognize everybody that donates to the cause, but basically we've set up a PayPal account, links down below, all the links are down below. Set up a PayPal account, set up a Patreon, and also a GoFundMe. So all those things are listed down below, guys. If you are interested in donating, wait till the end of the video. I'll remind you then and check those links out. We are going to be building a 26 by 52 shop. It's a new home for the lighter side of RC, and will probably happen next spring is the goal. But that is what we're working towards, and you guys, thank you for all your support and thank you for watching the videos and thank you for helping out as well too. So let's dive into this thing. What I like to do in the first video is talk about all the equipment, which is right behind me, that we're going to be putting in this aircraft, and we can go over all that stuff and I'll give you guys a brief rundown if there's any specifics on why I'm putting what I'm putting in this aircraft. So let's take a look at all the parts. All right guys, so first thing with an aircraft, obviously need a big power plant or a power plant. So let's quickly review what we're putting in this aircraft. So in the Huracan, we'll be installing a Swiwin 240 engine. Now I do have a 220 engine, which is the same shell size in my Diamond, and the 240 is going to be powering the Huracan. I'll tell you guys where I get all this stuff from. Some of it's from myself, some of it's from other dealers. So anyways, Swiwin, you can check out the lighter side of RC.com, my website. I am a Swiwin dealer, and that's where this came from Swiwin. So great engine, nice and light. We'll also be doing a test on this one. All right guys, box is a little bit disheveled, but we are putting Electron ER50 retracts in this aircraft. They do design a specific set for this aircraft. So essentially we've got the standard setup with all the ER50s, the legs and everything, and then the only kind of specific thing that we're using is the GS200 controller. Now obviously there's not lots of doors or anything on this aircraft, but it's got some nice gyro features in that controller. So that is what we're installing on the aircraft. All right guys, the brain of our operations here is going to be the 16 BPX Pro from JR DeeForce. This is the central hub and receivers and everything that run or will run the entire system on the plane. We're going to be using some of the servos as X-Bus, some of them just as normal. Servo-wise, we're using JR 8911 coreless servos on every surface and everything in the aircraft. A lot of you guys ask about JR and whether they're still in business and stuff like that. They are. DeeForce.net. JR is going strong still, and servos are amazing like they've always been. All right, guys, the heart of the aircraft is controlled by a JR28X radio. Now, obviously, these aren't available anymore, but JR does have a replacement radio coming out soon. Okay, so we have a couple options when it comes to gyro systems in the aircraft. My buddy David sent me this Cortex Pro, Cortex Pro gyro. Never used one before, that's why he sent it to me. Thank you, David, appreciate it. I think I'm gonna put this in the aircraft, give this a try. Never used one before, so we'll see what happens. I did purchase a Powerbox IGYRO and GPS unit for this aircraft, so this is on standby in case I don't like this one, but from what I've heard, guys really like these units, so we'll see, but I think initially we're gonna be putting the Cortex in. All the wiring in the aircraft is going to be Powerbox Maxi wire. That's the only stuff I will use in my aircraft. Works great, all customizable as far as leads and everything go. Generally, I'll get this stuff from DreamWorks when I place my big parts order for all the little bits and bytes for the aircraft. All right, guys, we've also got a custom fuel tank from Carlos at CM Jets. Now, I love Carlos's tanks. Absolutely best tanks out there. All my aircraft that require a special tank, he makes them all for me. And if you guys have never dealt with them before, amazing, amazing products. My Diamond has the smoke tank from CM Jets. Now, this is a copy of the tank that comes with the Huracan. Now, there's nothing really wrong with the Huracan tank. It is a fiberglass tank, but I do like Carlos's tanks because they're Kevlar, and also you can customize them with all the logos and stuff, and they just look phenomenal. And one of the things I love about the CM Jet tanks is you can order them kind of set up however you want. So I prefer barb fittings on mine, which is the way that he set them up. Here's the clunk setup that came installed already. It's all tie wired, nice big felt clunk as well, which I love to use, and just a nice high flow setup as well. So thank you from CM Jets. Beautiful tank. All right, one of the simple things, the UAT or bubble trap. I use the MAP tanks. This is the high flow model in all my aircraft, and this is available at modelaviationproducts.com. That's where I order all mine from, and this is what goes in all my customers' aircrafts as well too, unless they want something different, but great setups. All right, so we do have a custom light setup coming. This is only part of the setup. Now, there's a couple important things here. So all of our lighting products are coming from Sky Candy landing lights, and if you've seen my Diamond video, the light setup on that is nuts. So we've got our marker lights on the wing tips. These are the smaller ones, same design as the ones I used on my Diamond. This is the belly light, which is red. Insane how bright this thing is, so that's going to be incredible. All right, I forgot about the kit itself. So the actual aircraft itself came from Ozzy at Osario Customs, Canadian and North American dealer for the Huracan aircraft. So Ozzy is also making a custom set of light housings for the wing. So Osario Custom and Sal at Sky Candy is working together to make a custom light setup. So I think the housings have already been made. They're at Sky Candy right now getting the light setup on them, but this gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going in this aircraft. So these are the overlays that go over the wing. We create the cutout, the light housing goes in. Wait till you see these things, guys. They are incredible. So thank you, Ozzy at Osario Custom, and thank you, Sal and Sky Candy, for putting the light package together. Once this all shows up and we get ready to install it, we'll cover in more detail exactly what's going on. All right, and also a shout out to my buddy Joe, who sent me a bunch of 3D printed parts. This is my little parts bag for the Huracan build. I also have some other unique things that are coming up on this aircraft. I don't know if they're going to be listed on my website. I think I might just use them for my own builds. So I'm open to ideas if you guys are interested in being able to purchase some of these products I'll be using in the Huracan build. But I do have a bunch of 3D printed parts that Joe makes for me listed on my website, thelightersideofrc.com. Other thing we're going to be using on this build is, of course, my Jersey Modeler fuel tanks that all my planes use, whether it's gas or kerosene or smoke. But I'm going to be using the fill port that's available from Jersey Modeler. I'm also a Jersey Modeler dealer, if you're wondering where to get the stuff from, but we're going to be using some parts for the fuel system from this fill port system. So, all right, all my hardware and stuff that we need to finish the aircraft, that comes from RTL Fasteners, guys. Do have a discount code. That is specifically why I talk about this. If you use the discount code JV30, there's a link down below in the description, or the actual discount code, you'll get 30% off your order. I think the minimum order is $25, but rtlfasteners.com, you can buy these amazing little kits and great hardware. I love having these little boxes with all the parts I need for the aircraft builds. All right, guys, so that is all the parts and equipment we're going to be using in this aircraft. I don't think I've left anything out, but if I did, we'll obviously include it as we go through. All the little parts and stuff that I've ordered. Generally, I do a big parts order from DreamWorks down in Florida, and that's where I get all my little pieces and little, stuff like that from. But so that's kind of it. We're ready to basically begin on the Huracan build. So let's talk about what step number one is with this aircraft. All right, so step number one is basically getting the fuselage ready. So we've got all these formers which are covered in carbon, but we have some exposed wood. So what I'll do is I'm going to mix up some epoxy, and I generally use a 30-minute epoxy, like a finishing resin, stuff like that. Brand doesn't really matter, but what I'll do is I'll thin this out and I'll just paint that on all the exposed wood, and that is kind of the first step on the prepping the fuselage. Now, I do also like to do that to wing areas and things like that. If you've got gear that are going to be going in a wing area, you want to make sure you prep the wood surfaces there, and that just helps to protect the wood long term. There's some aircraft like my Tudor here, which is going on almost 10 years old. There's probably 400 plus flights on that aircraft, and it's still in beautiful shape. So that's step number one, a little bit of a boring step. I just turned some tunes on for this and basically spend some time getting that complete. So let's do that, and I'll show you guys the finished product. All right, so just a little note here on the tanks, because I had to pull the tank out first. So the stock tank with all the parts and everything, 490 grams. The tank from CM Jets, with obviously all the parts and stuff in there, 465 grams. So not much, but it's a Kevlar tank, and so we do save a little bit of weight. All right, so I've taken 20 milliliters of each resin and put that in there. Sorry, I've created 20 milliliters of resin, put a little bit of acetone in there to thin it out. Now you can use acetone, denatured alcohol, paint thinner, stuff like that, but I just had acetone handy. So we make this so it's kind of like almost a water consistency. Doesn't need to be thick at all, and basically just take a epoxy brush there and paint it on all the wood. All right, so all the former work on the aircraft has been treated, and basically right now we just need to set this aside and think about what our next steps are. So next step for me is going to be radio initial setup, but I was just doing some planning here with the tank. Now if you look at the stock tank, it kind of has a bit of an angle to it. That former has kind of wide in the middle and then angles back top and bottom. And that's just kind of because of the nature of the shape of the tank. So when you compare the stock tank to the CM Jets tank. The CM Jets tank is actually a little bit taller, which is great, so you're going to get just a little bit more capacity, and it's also because the square edge, you're going to get a bit more capacity there as well. So overall, the height of the smoke tank is basically the same. So so we will have to open up that former work just a little bit. So next thing I'll do on a build like this is I'm going to get my radio and have a new model set up on it, and then we will bind it with the power box or the box receiver system. And then what that'll allow us to do is when we're setting up the wings, setting up the surfaces, all that kind of stuff, we can center the servos and kind of get everything organized with regards to that. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to set up a new model. It's a pretty simple model, all the normal surfaces and stuff like that. There's nothing really overly special about it. The only thing that's going to be a little bit different is that GS200 controller, you can use an X-bus input and you don't have to use any specific channels going to the radio or to the gear controller box except one. So that'll save a little bit. But so what I'll do is I'll get that set up. I'll show you guys my channel layout, and that's the next step for me in a build like this. All right, so we pretty much have all the controls or the programming done here. Not the final details in the radio, but just kind of wanted to get everything laid out. The reason I like to do this as well is because it also helps me visualize, and I guess in my brain, what we're going to have to do for all the lines that are running between all the systems, right? So, for example, the Electron ER200 or whatever this thing is, the GS200, you can set this up with a bus system. So what I've done here is there's one cable going to the gear in that brings all the signals from the receiver setup and tells you what you're doing here. So basically we've got gear up channel, brake channel, and steering all set up with that one cable. So it just simplifies things. The one thing you have to do if you're setting that up, and this is not my final setup, this is just to make sure everything works, is you've got to run a jumper cable between the brake in and the steering in, and that just has to be the power, not the signal, because that feeds the power to the steering servo. So just got that set up, and I've pretty much got all my channels laid out here, and yeah, so that's it. So one of the nice things about doing it this way too is the nose, we don't need to do any Y leads or anything. Basically, this also is using the rudder input on the steering servo. So just helps simplify things. And I've also made a list here of all of our throws and everything so we know what we're shooting for as we get into the programming of this plane. All right, guys, so initially in builds like this, I will spend a lot of time just sitting and thinking and kind of figuring out what my game plan is. I spend a lot of time just pondering. And I've talked about that before, but yeah, so anyways, I've kind of just played around with the equipment layout a little bit, and yeah, that's what I spend a lot of time doing. So next thing I think we're going to move on to is the rear section of this aircraft. So the first thing we'll do is the rudder, and pretty straightforward. What I've done here is I've installed the tailpipe, you can see it there, and reason I've done that is so we can see, we've got these pre-done holes here for the surfaces for the wires to go through. Horizontal stabs or elevators right there, rudders right there. And then other slick thing, I don't know if I'll be able to capture it on the camera, but the former work has a bunch of little notches, little half circles near the top where you can run wires through, which is awesome. So we're going to end up covering all of those wires that come from the back end of this plane forward. We're going to cover that all with snakeskin material, so it'll all be protected. There's tons of room in between the pipe and where those lines are going to be run. I mean, we've got probably 8 to 10 inches in distance between that pipe, so there should be zero issues with heat. And then the other thing I really like about this aircraft is just the tail design here as well. So you're going to get a lot of air movement, sucking air through the actual double wall of the pipe. But then just the location of the pipe, we should have a lot of air movement coming out of the back end as well too, along with the thrust of the turbine itself. Any excessive air that goes in the intakes is going to come right out these back formers. So there should be tons of airflow coming through this and zero temperature issues. All right, so I'm quite impressed at the kit with regards to how much pre-work is done. So obviously the hinging is finished, our hard points are mounted, the actual rod holding the vertical stab on is mounted, it's filled with epoxy and I'm assuming a wood dowel, and we're also threaded right there as well too for the keeper screw. So you can see the little hole there, and you can, if you look inside, it's threaded. So that's all done on this end, on that surface. And then the screw to actually hold the rudder on is right, sorry guys, my flashlight is not working well, is right there. So anyways, that's how you access it if you need to take it off. So it's nice that all that pre-work's done for you. All right, so I'll generally keep a whole bunch of different servo horns in stock. Now these are for my own builds, but also customers' builds. The nice thing about this is you can really get the servo set up well. So obviously we could install a 2-inch servo arm on this, but wouldn't make a lot of sense because the servo arm would only move probably 10 degrees for full deflection on that surface. So what we're trying to do is trying to get the kind of the shortest horn to get the most travel out of the servo, so we're just getting our 27 millimeters of travel, which is what the specs call for. So we don't want to go too big, don't want to go too small. I kind of have a feeling a 1-inch one is going to work well, and we've got a couple options there, but you know, a 1-inch JR one, that's roughly what it's going to look like. And so I'll try that one first, and we'll see how that pans out. So what I'll do in this case is just put the servo arm on, hook the linkage up, see what happens, what kind of travel we're getting, and go from there. Now it is one of the downsides with a plane like this, brand new, no manual. It's a pretty straightforward build, but it's not telling you, there's no manual saying use a servo arm that has you know, a 1-inch travel servo arm kind of thing, right? So basically you're having to figure a lot of this stuff out, but hopefully if you're building a Huracan, all the stuff that I'm going through helps you out. All right, so the parts that came with the kit are all laid out right here. So they do come with carbon covers as well too, which helps to stiffen up the rod. And the ball links themselves are actually really nice, so brass ball on them. But I do like when these balls come and they're a little bit snug. They're not like flopping around in the keeper there. I've had some Dubro ones recently that it's like they're just floppy and they're ready to fall out and they're brand new out of the package. So excited for those. So I'm going to make this linkage up and we will see what we need to do with the servo arm. All right, so a couple considerations here with the rudder. First of all, you could have the servo flip the other way so the horn is coming up on the shorter side to the surface. Problem with that is when the surface works, you can see it goes at a fair bit of an angle there. So it's nice to have that extra distance for the balls to actually do their thing and twist. So I would suggest putting the servo on the servo spline on the furthest position away from the surface. On this case, that works well. Now what I did is I put a 1 and 1.25 servo arm on there. So we had the 1-inch hole there and then also the 1.25-inch hole. Tried it on the 1.25-inch hole, we got way too much travel. So we have a couple options. We can either switch the servo horn out. This is the one that's currently on there, and put just a 1-inch one on. The problem or difference with these JR 1-inch servo arms is they're quite thin. These ones are quite thick. So I'm thinking, you can kind of see it there, the difference. So the 1-inch servo arm is almost like the ball joint thickness there, which I don't think it'll ever be a problem. I'll probably just go with a thinner one because it's going to be sufficient. But anyways, so 1-inch servo arm is probably ideal for this surface. Now, what I do when I set my planes up in this scenario is I'm just going through and already putting my dual rates in. So with this turned to 70% on dual rates, I'm getting 27 millimeters of travel on the top of the rudder or vertical stab. So next thing I'll do here is I'm going to take this apart. I'm going to switch that servo horn out. I'm going to get my carbon rod cut so it's the right length. Now when I take this linkage apart, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put high sol in here and just slide this carbon rod over top, and then this will be a permanent linkage and it'll be really, really stiff in this area. So I'm going to do those things. So change that carbon length for the rod, and then also change that servo arm to be the stock 1-inch one. Alright guys, so didn't end up switching the servo arm because the other one had a hole that was too small. The M3 screw didn't fit in there, and it wasn't threaded obviously because it's too thin. So I just kept the original one, cut it off, sanded it down with a file, and it worked out good. So next thing I'm doing here is I undid the control rod. We've got the carbon rod all cut to the proper length. So what I'll do now is I've mixed up some 9462 high sol. And there's really no pretty way to do this other than just try and cover all the threads. And there'll be a lot of excess that comes squeezing out the other side, but that is okay. There we go. So it feels nice and solid. And what I'll do now is just thread this into the other end on the actual surface. And we know we've got to the right spot when it bottoms out on the carbon rod, because our carbon rod was cut perfectly to the right size. Here we go. We'll just clean the glue off. And just double checking here, we're bottomed right out basically, so we are good. Thank you, trusty bent screwdriver. You've done an amazing job so far in this build. Alright, so next thing we'll do is we'll just get this all hooked up and just check our geometry here, and we should be good to go. Alright, so got it hooked back up. We've tightened and Loctited everything here. So we're nice and centered here on the surface, and everything looks great. Alright, so last thing we're going to do here on this rudder, guys, is we are going to switch out the connector for the ashlock connector. So talk about this often in every video, but what I do on these ashlock connectors is on the actual surface or the wing or whatever it is, I always put the what I call the female side, so the one with the pins sticking out. Reason for that is then it's really easy to plug in a regular servo connector into this end, and you can just deal with this one servo by itself rather than coming up with a special pin type setup or something like that. So nice and easy to set up. If we had this end on the surface end like this, then there's no way to plug a regular servo connector in unless you use like a in-between connector and stuff. So just a pain in the butt. So we're going to put this connector on there. I'm not going to cut the wire any shorter, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the wire back in, and then I'm just going to use a little bit of CA, and that's going to hold that electrical tape down, and that's going to be how we're going to keep the wire in place. Now we want to be mindful about not having too much wire go inside because it drops straight down onto the pipe. So we're going to probably put a little connector or keeper inside there. We'll figure that out when we get the other portion of the wiring done on the rear part of the fuselage here. All right, so there's the final results. We've got our connector hooked up. We've got the electrical tape glued into place with crazy glue, or sorry, cyano. And then when we actually hook this up, I just realized we can actually tuck the excess down into the rudder itself beside the wing tube, so that'll be great. The one thing to keep in mind here is from the back side of this tube, the center of the hole on the fuselage is 18 millimeters, which is about right there, so you don't want to plan on having that line come out here because the hole's right there. So we're going to set the vertical stab aside, and then we are going to work on the pipe here. And we're just basically mounting this nice and simply. So there's actually another layer of wood behind this layer. So we've got about 1/2 inch of ply here. So all I'm going to do is use 3 mounting holes. So I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3. And we're just going to mark that on the pipe and drill a hole through the pipe or the bell mouth. And then we're just going to drill a hole right into the actual wood itself. And we'll just use 3 screws, and that'll be a nice simple way to hold that in place. And once that's done, then we'll take the pipe out, drill it and all that stuff, but then we're going to work on routing the cables for the elevators and rudder. All right, so there is what I was kind of envisioning here. It doesn't have to be super accurate, so we just got 3 holes drilled in the pipe, and now we can reinstall this and then basically drill our holes into the wood former. Now one thing, tip time for you guys. One thing I like to do when I'm installing pipes is the center pipe or the inner pipe. Always try and put your seam at the top, especially if you're going to have smoke oil installed in the aircraft, because if you get anything dripping in the pipe and the seam's on the bottom, that oil will work through the pipe. So less likely that the oil is going to drip inside the aircraft if you have that the seam on the top of the pipe. Tip time. All right, so I got my cable holders installed. So we've put one near the front here, and then another one right there, another one on that side, and then there's also one here on this side for when the rudder line comes through, and then it goes down the channel with the elevator side. And the clips that I'm using, they're just these double-sided tape plastic clips. I actually get these from DreamWorks, and they work really, really well. The only thing is, I don't trust the double-sided tape because eventually that's going to come off. That's why I use the shoe goop. So I stick these on where they need to go, put some shoe goop around the perimeter, and then they never come off. And if you do need to get them off, you can peel them off, and basically it leaves almost 0 residue, but great little cable holder systems. So with the cable holders being installed and we're just waiting for that shoe goop to cure, I made up 3 lines, one for the rudder and one for each elevator. So the rudder one's a little bit longer because it's got to come through and then go up to the rudder. So I've added about 8 inches to the rudder one. And then all the elevator ones, obviously they come right out the side here. Now I do need to stop and get some more of these grommets. So here in Canada, we get them from Princess Auto. And I think down in the US, you guys would get these from Harbor Freight. But they're just a little package of rubber grommets. And this particular one fits beautifully in the stock hole. And so we need to get another package, so we have one for that side as well. All right, so next thing we're going to install is the fins on the bottom part of the rear fuselage. Now, these are all pre-drilled, all set up, and they line up just beautifully. They're held on with these really coarse thread wood screws. We would call these drywall screws. And the kit itself already has the pieces of wood installed, one at the back there, and then one near the front. Now these only go on one way. As you can see, the lines get all lined up and all the screw holes and everything are perfect. The Huracan word there goes towards the outside, so it's readable. And so we'll get those installed. I've put a little bit of CA in each of the holes here, and otherwise basically we're just going to screw them in and be done with it. All right, so pretty simple process to install the fins. They are nice and solid. There is, you know, I guess a reasonable amount of give in them. So if you did have a gear up landing or something like that, they would probably fall off or get smashed off, but they may save the airframe. So anyways, those are installed. All right, guys, and that is going to wrap up everything for the very first video of the Huracan assembly. Hopefully you guys enjoyed everything that we covered in this episode. Again, this is going to be quite a quick build. Just a reminder, guys, for those of you that are interested in donating towards the new shop build, don't forget to check out the links down below: Patreon, PayPal, or GoFundMe as well too. There's links down below to any of those. It's pretty awesome to hear that you guys want to help the channel out. So again, thank you in advance to all of you guys that do donate to the channel. So Huracan build is progressing nicely. We've accomplished quite a bit in this video. We talked a lot about the products that are going in this aircraft. Again, we've got some amazing things coming for this aircraft. The light system, also the cradle system from Random Heli as well too. So that's coming as well. So lots of cool things coming in the next video. Next video, we're going to finish the elevators and then work forward on the aircraft. Because this aircraft is such a quick build, we will most likely be bolting the rear fuselage to the front of the fuselage in the next video. So stay tuned for that, guys. If you have any questions or comments about the Huracan build or anything, feel free to reach out to me. You can comment down below. You can send me an email at thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. Appreciate you guys watching. Thank you for supporting the channel, and we will see you in the next video.